Hello, human peoples. You're listening to the podcast network of Gamefully Unemployed. To support us and gain access to great exclusive podcasts like Fox Mulder is a Maniac, Tom and Jeff Watch Batman, Star Trek The Next Futurama, and our latest show, Spiel Boys, head over to patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. We do game streaming, movie nights with our patrons every Friday night, and you can even commission your own podcast about anything you want. Literally anything, within reason, and we have to do it. You are quite frankly out of excuses not to go visit patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. That's patreon.com/GAMEFULLY unemployed, which is spelled like it sounds. Hey, Dave.
Hey, Tom.
What are you reading?
Oh, I'm reading Marshal Law.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Welcome to Tom and Dave read Marshal Law, the final episode.
This is the very last one.
Episode. Yeah, if
episode.
I don't know
I
don't know who's listening to this. I hope people are listening to this because I'm enjoying doing it.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It's a very weird niche show we've done that's brought to you by MindFreak555. Thank you, MindFreak.
Thank you, MindFreak, so much. Yeah, I'd be into doing more podcasts where we just read something.
Yeah, it's chill.
It's pretty
chill. It takes almost the same amount of time as a movie, depending on how tired I am, or how detailed the comic is. But it's exercising a different part of the brain that's kind of fun,
Yeah.
The reading part of the brain,
yeah,
to be specific.
The reading area of the brain.
The read lobe.
Most associated with reading.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, my read lobe. Got a real itch in my read lobe.
Right.
My read quadrant.
The reading rainbow in your brain.
Reading rain lobe.
Reading rain lobe. That's perfect.
Just a brain. Reading Rainbow. Hosted by LeVar Burton's brain.
I'm coughing. You made me cough. Oh, that's wonderful. This is a comic book from the 80s, I want to say.
At least this is when it started. I'm not sure when this miniseries that we're covering today was published, so I can look that up while you keep talking to the kids.
Yeah, you don't have to. Called Marshal Law. He is a superhero hunter. Some would say a superhero hunting hero, but that's up for interpretation. That's part of what's in this final issue, because we've gone through it all, I believe. There's some crossover books.
Yeah, there's a couple crossovers
that we don't cover.
And there is apparently 2 novellas.
Right, yeah, that's according to the afterword in this, which we'll talk about. I think at the end of this, because if you remember, we're going to talk about casting if this was a movie, and then I think we should talk about the overall series, because as I said, this is the final episode. We've read pretty much all of the main stuff, and this is episode 5, where we're covering Secret Tribunal, which is kind of the closing story here.
Yeah,
which is
1994 is the publication date of this.
Oh, wow. This is both very random as a final plot line and not at all random either, I would argue.
No, it makes sense because it's all about the next generation of heroes.
Exactly. The weird thing is the fact that the aliens are involved.
Right.
The aliens come out of nowhere.
Yeah, it does a weird aliens / the Brood from X-Men storyline, but it's really just aliens.
The aliens are cool. They're
incubus. Yeah.
I guess what I mean is that, like, in terms of the themes of this comic series, this is right on the money. Like, this is a perfect way to end it.
Yeah.
In terms of, like, the actual plot, it's very random to me. Introducing the aliens, and then, like, I kind of thought we'd get more out of that whole public spirit in space stuff, and, like, more of a reveal of, like, what that was, or uncovering a more insidious plot. But again, this is this isn't bad, and they do play with the idea of a next generation superheroes, like you said, that are made in another horrific way. So it's kind of about the cycle repeating itself.
Yeah, and I think
I would say
that was the reveal, was it not? That like what they were doing up in space were growing. God damn it, growing.
Say the word.
These basically flesh vats to sculpt new superheroes, and we learned that in this. I think we learned that in this one.
Yeah. And it does. It all kind of makes sense. I think it's more that the aliens come out of nowhere. They're going back to the ship that they were introducing, in the first one, which is public spirit, and all these superheroes went to space, and now that ship has been like just floating around Earth, right?
Yeah, they treat it like a memorial, sort of. And it starts with basically the Teen Titans daring their two newest members to go break into the derelict spaceship.
Yep, and one of them, what is his name? He's like a luminescent man or something?
Bioluminescent boy.
He gets skinned alive by an alien.
He was skinned alive!
The gory detail that his skin continues to glow afterwards is fun.
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
Yeah. And so the other kid who is... He's not public spirit, growing boy. Who we learn immediately has a problem. He can't grow. He doesn't have... His power isn't working.
Yeah, he can't figure out how to get his power to work.
And I would argue he's also the main character of this. He's the protagonist.
Yeah, we that's another reason why I think maybe this one feels a little random in terms of plot, because Marshal Law is not even the main character. Like every other...
I do think that's right on the money.
You're right. That is true, yeah.
Yeah.
The point is to see him through the eyes of a younger person who wants to become a hero, and then through the course of this story learns that maybe it's not the best thing in the world.
Yes, exactly. It's kind of about what martial law... It's this... I thought of this comic in general as like dialing back a little bit on the cynicism.
A little bit,
reminding people what we like about superheroes, and pointing out that martial law is sort of no different. Not just the character, but the comic is that like we're essentially still just watching a superhero. Yeah. It's an anti-superhero, but it's still all the same beats. It's like, oh, I'm avenging, because like this superhero has to avenge someone in his arc as well, the same way martial law did. And it's kind of pointing out that martial law, the bones of martial law, the story, isn't that different than a superhero. Like, it's all kind of the same DNA. It's just what you say with it.
Yeah, exactly. And, like, martial law is serving the same sort of mentor, role model position for Growing Boy that, like, martial law, he says that he grew up idolizing public spirit.
Right. I would say this comic almost kind of takes the piss out of the other ones in a way, like, and it feels like the writer saying, like, I recognize the hypocrisy of this, or like, you know, in not so many words, because I don't know, it's a very interesting one. It might be my favorite of all of them because of one, the Incubus look awesome. And two, I just really like what they did here with the heroes. So we can go through it. Is Marshal Law goes to James Woods.
Yep.
Forget his actual name. With his gun desk that rocks.
Yeah, it's like at the tip of a Tommy gun. The fun little details that they cram into each of these panels. I know we bring it up each episode, but it bears repeating. Every panel of this comic is just stuffed with little details and jokes and things like that. And yeah, this is full of that same shit. And one of them being that, the Commander James Woods, whatever his name is, Mick something. Mick Woods. James Mick Woods.
Mick James Woods.
His office in City Hall or wherever is just situated at the end of this gigantic machine gun.
Yeah.
It's like the Gotham City statues in the Joel Schumacher movies.
Yeah. And I really like the beginning conflict, which is Marshal Law is like, you haven't paid me.
Right, he's coming. And he wants all the money for killing all of the zombie heroes from the last run. Yeah. And then James Woods makes the argument that I immediately thought of, where he says, well, technically they were already dead.
Yeah, so we're not paying you. And I love this. I really felt this where it's like, oh yeah, they all are like contractors, and like, the money isn't great.
No, yeah,
like, they're not
right. Yeah. He's just like trying to rub two nickels together.
Yeah, and so James Woods is like, you know where the real money is? He's just like, superheroes don't even make that much money, to be honest. Like, we don't care about superheroes anymore. And what the real money is in killing aliens. And I love this line. Marshal Law says, but I don't hate aliens.
I don't hate aliens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That really says a lot about him. And he basically says, like, we need you to fight these aliens on this ship, and you need to team up with these superheroes, which Marshal Law isn't. He's done similar things in the past, you know? And so they team him up with... these guys are like the X-Men, or like they're like you said, Teen Titans.
Well, yeah, one of them
these superheroes are the secret tribunal.
Yeah, this is like the intelligentsia from like Marvel Comics.
Yeah, and it's Liechtenstein. What's all their names? Ragnarok is one. Breathless. The one I remembered was Anti-Man, because I think that's the funniest.
Anti-Man has the coolest power. He just leaps into different people's bodies. Yeah.
Yeah, he's just like a symbiote. It's solid.
And then one of them is very clearly Professor X.
Oh, yeah. And then Rune is the alien one. Vrilla is the final one. Which one? I think Liechtenstein has in space, no one can hear you ream on his codpiece.
Yeah, he's the big metal one, right? He's the one that's kind of like Iron Man / Doctor Doom, basically.
Yeah. So he teams up with them to go on this. Yeah, and there's two ships, right? And the ship next to it is like the training facility for all these young superheroes,
right?
And that's where they meet the growing boy.
Yeah, the one ship is where all the young Justice Leaguers are grown. We learn out of vats and programmed to want to become heroes, which is pretty dark. But it's also, not on theme for this comic. It's basically
not at
talking
all,
about how you're spoon fed. This is a British comic, but I'm sure it's true the world over, because it's definitely true in America, where you're just spoon fed this jingoistic bullshit since birth to condition you to grow up a certain way. And they've just distilled that point into something ridiculous. Yeah, which is flesh vats and programming, but it's the same thing.
I'm sure we've made this comparison before. It's very Venture Brothers, to the point that the superheroes are very naive. I love the part where Marshal Law is getting it on with, I believe, Breathless.
I think so,
and the kid, they're outside, and one of them's like, "How's he managed to keep going so long?" And the other one says, I wrote it down. It's just as well, because I heard some older women slit your throat if you don't satisfy them, which I thought was like a fun rumor to have.
Well, there's a through line where they, for whatever reason, they've conditioned these young Justice Leaguers to be terrified of sex. To the point where Growing Boy has sex with what's her name, Super Feelings Girl, something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
And it's like a huge deal.
They punish them, yeah.
Yeah, they put her in like the punish
room. And that's where Marshal Lark comes in. He shows up after that's happened, and the Super Feeling Girl is like trying to get out, sounding this alarm, and they're like, yeah, she just wants out. And then they realize, like, no, she can super sense something's coming this whole time. And it's one of the aliens that kills her. And so Growing Boy wants to avenge her death, basically. Because he's in love with her.
Yeah.
And so like that's basically Growing Boy's arc. And then they go in and they start fighting the aliens. There's also Public Spirit Jr., who's like, he's a little Homelander, right?
He's tiny Homelander. Idea. Yeah, he even does the same. He rabbit claps the one girl and makes her ears bleed.
Yeah, he's just a sociopath.
Yeah, he's just a little Homelander.
The idea. And it's the idea of like, yeah, obviously they're not treating these. They're brewing the next sociopaths like Public Spirit. It's the cycle beginning again. But this one growing boy is like, I kind of like martial law, and like, I kind of think this is bullshit. You know, like he's a little.
He starts to identify the seams in what he believes in. Like they pull him aside. They're like, okay, martial law is here with the secret tribunal to hunt the aliens, but he's not a hero. He hates heroes. So here's what we're gonna do. We're going to use him as bait to lure the aliens out, and when they kill him, we'll just kill the aliens. And they all vote yes for it, but Growing Boy really doesn't want to. And he's conflicted. And feel like you said, he's like, for the first time, he's looking at this and be like, oh, this is kind of bullshit, right? Like, this is bullshit.
It's the idea that these heroes are heroes only in image, right? Which we'll definitely get to in terms of the overall themes of this comic book. And so, like, yeah, he's disillusioned, and then he watches as basically what we learn is, well, first of all, they try that trap, and the alien ends up just attacking the other superheroes instead. They say something about like it wanting young flesh, and that's why it's going after them.
Yeah, I think there's also an implication it wants the superpowered people, and martial law doesn't have any superpowers.
Right, and it also skins them, and what martial law figures out is because their brains are their skin.
Yeah,
which is
really gnarly.
A cool sci-fi idea. Yeah. Terrible survival.
Right?
Terrible.
Right? Why would you have your brain be huge and outside of your body?
Yeah, not a good place for your brain.
No.
So he skins the alien and realizes that's what you have to do. And then they go back
to the other ship, the Public Spirit's original ship, where bioluminescent boy's skin is still glowing in the dark to guide them. And they find the big old alien queen, which is like this really grotesque looking, just shock white goober. Really gnarly drawing. It's pretty sweet.
Real gnarly goober. I love that Public Spirit Jr. is basically Zap Brannigan. Like, doesn't he pull another thing and he accidentally like... Well, he fucks up again. He keeps fucking up.
He's a coward. He keeps saying... He's a
coward, yeah.
He keeps saying, oh, I'll help you do this, and then he either runs off or like he tries to shoot his ray.
Or he fucks it up.
And he misses. That's what he does here. He shoots like the power and the lights go out.
Right, and the lights go out.
Yeah.
But it all ends with Growing Boy finally becoming... Growing Boy.
Yeah.
He grows into a giant.
He's Giant Man, yeah.
Fights the alien and kills it and gets his revenge. And at the end, he says, like his afterthought is like, I kind of think that like they told me martial law was corrupt and bad, but from what I've seen, he is the actual hero here. He was the actual one. Because at one point he saves Public Spirit. And he works with the heroes in this. Yeah. To a point where he's like part of the fucking Super Friends here. And he's the only one who's getting the job done throughout. And the Growing Boy realizes it, and it kind of ends with him like going to Public Spirit and he gets his merit badges basically because he saved the day. And not Public Spirit, and Martial Law is like, good job, kid. And you can tell he's like bummed though, because he's like, you're just going to become another fucking superhero.
Yeah.
And he asks him like, well, I could go with you. I could be your Superboy. And he smiles at him and he says no. And he leaves. And it's just this young superhero kind of watching Martial Law leave and being like the first superhero to like appreciate him and who he is. And to say like, no, he's the hero. That guy's the hero.
Yeah.
And that's a good ending for this, you know? It's like putting aside the cynicism and the meta stuff and like showing like, yeah, he got to one kid. He got to one superhero.
But hey, you know, Dave, when you're out there to change hearts and minds, you got to do it one at a time.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're right. It is kind of sort of unexpectedly, or like I didn't really realize it at first, but you're right, it is sort of the perfect way to end this end this series, is because it's going full circle. So it's like, oh, he set out in the beginning to like tear down this worshipful society around superheroes, and he has kind of started to succeed because he's able to take somebody who is just fully indoctrinated from the moment he existed. You know, he was created in a lab to become a superhero, but he was able to shows this kid that, oh, this is kind of bullshit. So yeah, it's full
and
circle.
it also shows that they're making an observation a little bit about hate too, which is like, it's like you catch more flies with honey. Martial law, like, kind of putting his hate aside and working with superheroes, despite how terrible they are to him, taking the high road.
And he's
how the idea of like you can change things from the inside more than as the enemy, you know?
Yeah, and in a lot of cases, especially with a lot of societal problems. And also he's kind. He's like kind for the first time to this kid.
Yeah, he is.
He doesn't need to be nice to Growing Boy, but he is.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. Because I think he does, and this scans for him, he sees the difference between, like, someone who's an older hero who's just, long gone.
Right.
And all someone who's young.
All the Tribunal, they're all, like, really, like, he calls them Nazis at one point, and they are. They're, like, real eugenicists. And we've covered that in previous episodes, and that's part of the jingoism, and nationalism, and et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, it was, I forgot where I was going with that, but just that once I guess it's just, he recognizes that there are some that are beyond hope and then some that aren't.
Yeah.
Particularly with the kids. Yeah. When they have to, like, they've realized at one point that, like, the aliens are replicating themselves because they've gotten into the flesh vats. Right. So it's like all of these horrible mutant cloned children are waking up, and like the Tribunal superheroes are just ripping through them. And Marshal was like, guys, you don't have to enjoy this quite so much. And they're like, oh, they're unclean.
Right, where he's like, where they're like, we have to kill them, but Jesus, guys.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
You guys are really too excited about killing these kids.
Yeah. It's solid. Good comic. I have thoughts about obviously the overall comic, but in terms of like Secret Tribunal, are we done talking about that and we can talk about casting it?
I think so, yeah, because I think anything else is just, it's not a very long issue, this installment. I think it's only maybe 30 or 40 pages, so.
Yeah, but there's stuff like there's the afterword we can talk about.
Yeah. I just want to say I'm good to move on to the casting section, because otherwise I feel like I'm just going to keep repeating myself.
Sure, for sure. So who's going to play the Secret Tribunal here?
I don't know. Like, that's a lot of characters.
Ragnarok feels like he could be a Tom Hardy. But,
Sure.
I would say Breathless
I'd say the ones
has the vibes of like a Margot Robbie. It's weird. Like, I'm associating them with Suicide Squad a little bit or something.
I was getting more like a Juliette Lewis vibe from Breathless.
Holy shit, that's so much better.
Yeah.
You're right.
Someone who's kind of like...
You're right, because she's very insecure.
And she's also like fed up with it. Like she's kind of recognizes the system for what it is and is over it.
Yeah, I could see that.
I think the two main ones, we definitely need to figure out who would play Growing Boy, because he's like the main person in this.
That's hard, because I think we already did Tom Holland, but like Tom Holland is the universal like bright-eyed, bushy-tailed motherfucker,
plucky young superhero.
Yeah, I would honestly say an unknown for that same reason, like a young unknown that you can kind of put anything you want on that person, because that's the point of the character. Yeah, is like he's the start of a career.
Yeah, you'd want to Harry Potter these little fucks, right? Because like you'd want to get like a Malfoy to play Public Spirit Jr.
Yeah, you would, absolutely. And I think that you would want to Harry Potter these fucks, because then you have not Public Spirit. You have Marshal Law, who we would think an established actor.
He's the Hagrid in this situation. Yeah, the Dumbledore of this situation.
Anti-Man could be anyone.
Yeah, Anti-Man is fun.
I just want to see Jason Statham with a flat top wig. So that's my vote.
Sure.
But it could be anybody.
That makes sense, though. I like the idea, because he's at the end, he like warps out of his own body right before it gets killed by the queen and goes into Public Spirit Junior's body.
Yeah.
So I like this idea of like this little Malfoy twerp getting yelled at by Jason Statham's disembodied voice.
Hell yeah.
Just dunking on him the whole time.
Yeah. Liechtenstein is like, you don't see their face.
He's just a voice. Yeah, it would just be a voice.
Yeah. So it could be anybody.
Yeah?
James Earl Jones. The AI. James Earl Jones AI.
Yeah. His AI voice that he just sold to Disney or whatever.
Yeah. Rune kind of looks a little bit like John Turturro in one of the pictures, so I'm just going with John Turturro.
I think he's supposed to be Namor, I think.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I mean, sure, we can go with John Turturro.
I don't know. The character is drawn with darker skin, so I might be whitewashing Rune a bit.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. Let's think a little harder.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think like a John Turturro type is right.
Yeah. A John Turturro type. Professor X, I don't know, man.
Fucking Patrick Stewart, who gives a shit?
Yeah.
Put him back in that. All he wants is someone to yank on his hog.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like their version of Professor X like accidentally fried his brain somehow.
Yeah.
On some mission, so he's basically just this little sex creep.
This weird pervert, yeah.
In his future wheelchair.
It's the
chair.
idea that he's like, he like has dementia, and it's he's just pure like, just like urges. It's solid.
Yeah. I'm thinking about Rune. I'm still trying to nail that one down. I
don't know. You're better at knowing actors than me.
I'm trying to think of like a John Turturro type.
John Turturro.
Yeah, no, that sounds about right. No,
yeah.
I don't know why I keep thinking Dennis Haysbert. That doesn't feel quite right.
Who's Dennis Haysbert?
He's the president from 24. He was in the 13th Floor.
Oh, he would actually be kind of fun. I think he has the vibe because he's got that like no bullshit vibe.
That's true.
From what I've seen him in.
Yeah.
Again, from what I've seen him in.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's always what he plays, but yeah.
Frequently, yeah.
I can kind of see that.
He usually plays a little gentler characters than John Turturro, but.
Yeah, but I can see him nailing that. I don't know, man.
Sure.
He might be a little old, but like, whatever, man.
Well, they're all supposed to be kind of older.
That's true. They are, aren't they?
Mm.
Well, I'm okay with that casting. If we want to just talk about the comic,
yeah.
whole.
Let's move on.
Okay, because this was one issue, and then we have the afterword, which pointed out some stuff that didn't even occur to me. Because I knew obviously this is a satire.
Yeah.
But this guy, is British, and he was talking about in the afterword like specific events or ideas that were being mocked in reality. Like it's funny is that
Pat Mills is the writer we're talking about.
Yeah, it's funny is that. So I guess when we were going through this. Mm-hmm. I kept thinking, what's the one-to-one exact comparison in the superhero genre? And then when it came to the real-life comparison, stuff like the CIA and just like different shitty things the government rich people did, I never thought of that as one-to-one. I thought of it as this overall vibe. When what I'm realizing in the afterword is it's quite the opposite.
Yeah.
Where it's like the superheroes were just this vague comparison. Whereas like stuff, for example... the zombie one is about the idea of rich people wanting to live forever.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, yeah.
It was interesting. It was super interesting to read the afterward. So if you guys who are listening, if you did get the digital edition or whatever, so I think it's still out of print, be sure and read the afterword. It's only about 2 pages.
Yeah.
And yeah, it is interesting that he said he started from, like, the character's genesis was him seeing sort of quote unquote heroic figures or ideals and stuff that were, held up by media and culture for so long start to get unmasked for being shitty, vile, self-indulgent, evil in some cases. So it's interesting that he started from like real life things and then just kind of tried to make the superhero thing fit later, because the way he describes it in the afterword, it was just like, oh, the superhero idea fits perfectly with what I want to talk about, which is
right. And he was saying, like, because it's easier to talk about politics when it's through this lens, this filter, so you don't get in trouble either. Like it works really well.
So it's interesting. I think that maybe in my mind anyway, sets it apart from some of the other more popular or better known deconstructions like Dark Knight Returns or Watchmen, even though Watchmen's much more about society. Yeah, he does mention
in the afterword.
But it's interesting that he wasn't, like, the goal wasn't to deconstruct superheroes. Like he wants to talk about how we like idolization and self-mythologizing in real life. So he's not like he wasn't coming from it at a standpoint, it's like, I want to satirize comics. He's like, no, I'm just doing satire, just general political, socio-political satire, and I'm just doing it with superheroes because it works as a metaphor.
Right. So, like, yeah, a lot of it is a metaphor for things, that the U.S. does. Those are pretty obvious, at least to us.
Yeah, the CIA stuff was real obvious, yeah.
Yeah. But it's interesting because he does mention that superheroes are also fascists.
Yeah.
And that he does think that about a lot of superheroes. Like, that isn't, like, not also the point.
Right, it's not part of its DNA. It's just, you would, reading this, and the way you and I talked about it in the previous episodes, you just sort of assume that was the primary goal of creating this comic, was to satirize comic books, and it's not the case.
It's not. It's more about, satirizing the world and then sort of pointing out that comics are kind of... I mean, I'm not a big comic book person, but he seems to think that a lot of comics are kind of, propaganda for these ideas, right-wing ideas, conservative ideas.
Yes.
Which makes sense.
And it's certainly true for some comics, yeah. And even some comics that aren't necessarily trying to do that. There's just certain pieces of iconography and tropes within the genre that come from a conservative status quo standpoint.
Yeah. I would argue it's the same way that most action films are, whether or not they want to be pro-gun.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where it's like, it's not that they're necessarily trying to say that message, but so many of them glorify gun violence. And that's what an action film is. And, like, you can be an adult and, like, separate those things in your mind and enjoy the action film for what it is, for sure. But it's the same way as, like, him pointing out, like, and this is one of the things that's always irked me about superhero films, that he pointed out that I had almost completely forgot about. It was one of the things early in Marvel films that bothered me, and watching, and I guess I just don't think about it as much, which is that superheroes are inherently never the underdog. They always have, they're so, they so very much outgun the average criminal.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's
to
like,
the point that it's like we're like ants to them at this point, where it's like Thor versus a bank robber would never happen. It's Wonder Woman in that scene where she pulverizes those terrorists.
Yeah, Roose Bolton.
Unironically,
they're like the secret police.
Yeah,
like they come down hard with this, the hammer of because they work hand in hand with the government, it's like the government coming down on a bank robber,
Exactly. And it's
and they're all like, you pointed this out, I think, in a Cracked article maybe, but like they're all very pro-military. They're all pro.
It's Captain America. Like it's that.
They're all pro. They're all pro-imperialism.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah. And I know, again, comic books explored this all the time with like Red Sun and stuff, where it's the idea of, and it is always like, I think it's this thing is the reason I always want to bring it up is because what's really chilling to me is the idea of us forgetting that.
Yeah.
And especially nowadays, because I would also argue that superheroes now represent something they never were supposed to. But they naturally do in the climate we have now, is they also represent pro-corporations.
Yes.
Because they represent Disney. They represent these huge corporations that are controlling them and making all this money off of them. So I think there's just something naturally dystopian about the concept of a hero in our society, that the word hero, and that we associate it with pro-America, pro-military, pro-corporations in these icons now. Mm-hmm. And that is so dystopian. And I think back when he was just making these observations in comics weren't the world, they didn't take over everything.
They were still pretty niche.
Yeah, and then that idea of they've always been kind of conservative and pro-war and pro weirdly nationalist and all of that stuff. That was all that was worthy of observation when he was making these comics, but now it's frightening in a way.
Yeah.
The fact that it's so big.
Yeah, it's
because it's
like The Boys is barely satire.
Yeah, and The Boys had the same. This is what's interesting, is in this comic, martial law becomes one of the heroes because that what they're saying is ultimately you're still watching a hero, right?
Yeah.
Even if it's an anti-hero hero, The Boys is kind of ending up doing that too, which is always funny. To me, is that watching The Boys, it now just feels like some of the plots are very much just a superhero plot,
and I think
because
I do.
It's the.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, it's kind of like the Dark Knight, in this weird reverse, is you either die the anti-hero or you live long enough to become the hero. Where it's if we're following these characters, these anti-heroes, what makes them different than a hero? And their propaganda is no different than pro-America propaganda. Ultimately, you're still doing the same thing.
Yeah, and I think The Boys is trying to address that with a little bit of the dynamic between Huey and Butcher and the rest of the group and Butcher.
Yeah.
Butcher is martial law, and I like that in both The Boys and in martial law. I'll steer it back to the comic because we're talking about martial law.
Oh, I have a way to do that too.
Yeah, they do show that Marshall is a hypocrite.
Yeah.
They constantly show that he's a hypocrite.
Yeah, he's dressing cool. He's
yeah.
It's the same shit. But again, you can argue as he points out in the afterword, martial law is a working man. Where so many superheroes tend to have these more posh positions. They tend to be very privileged people. People will say well, Peter Parker, he's just this poor boy, and it's yeah, he's funded by a billionaire.
Well, now
all,
he is with the MCU version of him, but yeah,
the MCU. Yes.
He was. That's one of the things that makes him so unique. But yeah, overall, it's true that it's usually white people from middle to upper class backgrounds. They're sometimes they're even literally captains of industry, like Bruce Wayne
right.
or Oliver Queen or Tony Stark. A lot of them come from the military. A lot of them are cops. They all have this like cop mentality. So it's a very
they're all like beloved and not like they're like very few dark mans, you know?
Right.
And very few ones that are like, you're living in a fucking sewer and you're hideous and you know what it's like to be down on your luck.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. They all come from a very small, specific demographic in general.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's still mostly the case. So
right. And it's troublesome only when it takes over a society, a culture.
Yeah.
When a culture becomes obsessed with this genre, it's just a little worrying.
As this one has.
If it's just, yeah, exactly. When you look at, people like, Donald Trump and like where we're heading with entertainers becoming politicians and it being about like not actually getting the boring stuff done, but like these sweeping stunts. It's not healthy ultimately. Because again, it's that idea of like, as a form of art, there's nothing wrong with it. As a form of entertainment, there's nothing wrong with it. If it takes over a culture and becomes this corporate giant, then it just feels, again, really dystopian.
It feels like it starts to feel like propaganda, which is what martial law is talking about.
Exactly. It really starts to feel like propaganda.
To the point where, like, you remember when Disney and Sony were in a little bit of a spat over doing the third Spider-Man movie over who was going to get money, whether or not it was going to happen. Like, Disney was able to rally so many devoted fans to, like, bully this other corporation to get their way. And there were they're both gigantic corporations, obviously, but
yeah, so it's
the idea that Disney, like, which I think I could be speaking out of my ass, but I think it's the biggest conglomerate in history.
probably.
And maybe outside of Amazon, so it's probably Amazon. But Disney is a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate. It's got its fingers in every conceivable pie. It owns so much shit that it has no right to own. Weaponizing people that they've indoctrinated with their superhero movies, because it's weird. It's
these
weird.
Comic-Con
You're right.
stuff
It's
is weird.
fucking
Like
weird.
These corporate events where they like unveil. It's for people who like, another perspective of this is like, remember, like, and it still sort of exists. Apple fandom is no different to me.
Yeah.
Where it's this weird corporate fandom where they're like,
Tesla.
what gizmo are they gonna? Yeah, our Tesla fandom. Mm-hmm. It's all kind of part of the same thing, which is like, I use an Apple product. Nothing wrong with it. I enjoy Marvel films. It's when it becomes this weird corporate fandom where it's like, dial it back. Like, they don't care about you.
Yeah.
They're giving you a product, and you can buy the product, certainly. But, like, I don't know. There's something about that entire vibe. And I know it's probably not most comic book fans,
No.
But it's this thing that exists now in our culture that's just, like, really fucking creepy to me. That's all. And it's all kind of part of the same thing.
Yeah.
Going back to martial law, though, I have a question about martial law, and this is a possible critique of martial law.
Go ahead.
What is the difference between satirizing something and just doing the thing? As we pointed out with the superhero stuff, it isn't that different. But one of the other things that martial law loves to do is nudity and sexual violence.
Yep.
And the question is, like, in this episode, in this issue, they have the part where she's like begging for her life, and they do a like up the skirt shot of her, and they're like sexualizing her while she's begging for her life, and it's like, is that a satire, or are you just doing the thing? Like, what is the difference? Again, what is the difference? Like, are you trying to make people horny watching this? Or are you trying to point out that we sexualize people, specifically women, at horribly vulnerable times?
And specifically,
I would argue,
specifically in comics, particularly of this period, like the late 80s, early 90s.
I would argue in this comic book, if his intent was to satirize it, there's no way to tell.
Yeah.
There's no way to tell.
I want to give them the benefit of the doubt. And
yes,
say that it is.
But whether or not it was a failure in my mind. Like, they did not, even if they were like, we set out to satirize that, I would say, no, you failed. You failed at that. You did a lot of great stuff in this comic.
Yeah.
But in terms of depicting sexual violence and the treatment of women as a satire in this, it just felt no different, ultimately.
Right, they just did the same
thing
that the things that they're making fun of do. Like, they just,
yes.
They have hypersexualized women who are constantly in peril. None of them ever graduate to bona fide character status. Lynn kind of does in the original run. Only after she is murdered, though.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they don't.
If there's a female character in the comic, you're gonna see their boobs.
They're
like, that's just
Well, it's yeah. You're gonna and they will almost certainly be murdered as well. Horribly. So yeah, I would totally agree with you there. Like, if their intent was to sort of put it under a microscope, they kind of failed, because you're just doing the same thing. You're not being clear enough with what you're trying to say with it, because we're coming out of reading all of this not knowing whether or not they were trying to satirize it, or if they were just doing the hypersexualized violence that was so pervasive in comics of this period.
Right. We could give it the benefit of the doubt while reading it, but having finished it, it's official. Like, no, you didn't do a good job.
And they did a
if that
poor
was their
job
intent.
if that was their intent. Yeah, because they never say anything about it. They just sort of do it.
They never do.
It's like, here it is. I'm like, yep. So what do you have to say about it? I don't know, but we're going to keep doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
So
yeah. I would say that's my biggest critique of this comic series.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely.
Yeah.
That's the one thing. Like, otherwise, I would wholeheartedly recommend this comic to people. But because that element of it is so pervasive and just as repellent as it is in the things that they're claiming to be satirizing, like, I can't really recommend this book to everyone.
Right. It's I would feel a little shameful recommending
Yeah,
it.
I would have to, even the people I would recommend it to, I'd have to do it with a few caveats.
Yeah.
Like, I'd have to say, okay, just full disclosure, there's some sexual violence in this that is really weird and kind of super testosterone driven, and it's not really cool. Right. And I'm not sure if it's supposed to be satirical or not.
Right.
So yeah, that's like the bummer about this book, I think.
Yeah. I do think there's a whole genre of comic books that are like that, right? I imagine. Yeah. Sort of like that tweet about anime, about everybody has their own level of tolerance for anime bullshit, and recommending anime is based off of like knowing that person's tolerance.
Yeah.
Because there's always like a little bullshit.
Yeah, there's a lot of
weird.
Yeah, it's like I love Ninja Scroll, but I can't tell people to watch Ninja Scroll. And if you've seen if you've seen Ninja Scroll, you know why I can't.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah.
Yeah, every time watching an anime, there's always this moment where you go, "Oh, come on, guys. Really?"
Like
I was enjoying this.
Like we talked about when we were watching Dead Ringers. It's like a white knuckle experience sometimes when you're watching an anime.
Yeah, Cronenberg is always that, where you're like, "All right, just be cool.
Be cool,
David.
man. Be cool."
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. This is no different.
Yeah. Although by this book, like by this last little mini series, it wasn't a white knuckle experience. It was just like when.
No, you know what to expect.
You know exactly what to expect, and it did what it had done the previous things. So it's just like, oh, okay, more of this bullshit.
Yeah, exactly. And I would argue it gets in the way.
I agree. It doesn't need to be there.
Yeah, because they don't say anything.
They're not
about
saying
it,
anything with it, so it's not
there's
adding
no point
anything.
in having it.
It's just giving it this little extra layer of grime.
Yeah, it's a little edgelordy, you know.
Yeah, and the whole book is edgelordy, and a lot of it is very silly and obviously satirical because, as I mentioned, Marshall is himself a huge hypocrite.
Right, and they again, they make fun of him like I said at the top of this. There's a sex scene where he can't figure out which zipper to use because he's just covered in zippers.
Yeah.
That's them pointing out that he's just a silly edgelord.
Yeah. But of course, when he finds the correct zipper, it's a really long zip.
Right.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, because he's an edgelord.
Yeah, he's an edgelord.
He's not just
hard to tell.
He's not just a cool badass outsider, Dave. He also has a huge hog.
Yeah, it's just hard to tell when they're with us. They're laughing at it with us, or when they think this is cool, you know?
Right, like you would be. I feel like you would run the risk of, if you were in the room with these guys and you're talking through the story with them, they would get to some point. It's like, yeah, and then Marshall like fucks this chick and her tits are flying everywhere. And like, yeah, that's pretty stupid, right? And they're like, what do you mean? That's awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, oh, okay.
Where it's like, it feels like all comic book people are somewhere in them is a teenage boy.
Yes,
a horny teenage boy.
Horny teenage boy.
Yeah. Yeah. And us all. Yeah. But like, you know, it's about keeping that horny teenage boy locked up.
Within you are two wolves.
Two wolves. One is a horny teenage boy.
One is a horny teenage boy.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Well, that's all I got.
Yeah, I think we're done. Are we done?
Yeah. I think we're done. Mind Freak 555. I really appreciated this. This was very different than what we had done in the past. This was a really interesting, like, and fun comic book to read and talk about and think about. So again, I going back to the beginning of this, I hope other people enjoyed this, not just us and Mind Freak. I'm sure some people have read the comics. Some people listening might not have, But this was just overall, for me at least, a very fun and satisfying exploration. This
Yeah, no, I mostly enjoyed this.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
really, like we said, it's what we just got done talking about is really the only negative thing I had to say about this. Overall,
Oh yeah.
I thought this was a
Well, I
cool
enjoyed
book.
talking
Yeah.
about it. I mean,
Yeah.
and reading it and judging it and all that and thinking about it.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah.
And I guess that's good. It's art. You know.
Yeah,
That's what art's supposed to do.
yeah.
It's almost like comic books are art, man.
Sure, man. Listen, I don't get up my ass about that. If it's
They are though, right?
Yeah,
I
no,
mean, everything's art.
yeah,
the movie Moonfall's art.
yeah,
but
anything
it's
that
just-
anything that people have to come together and create is art, because art is expression via creation. That's period. So like
Right.
I don't split hairs over that.
You know what's art, Tom?
This fucking podcast, Dave.
This podcast. I was gonna say pro wrestling, but yeah, this
Yeah.
podcast.
Oh yeah. Pro wrestling's ballet.
Yeah. This is all art.
It's all art. Everything is art.
What we're doing right now, this is
Yeah.
art.
It's all art.
These words.
Yep.
Yeah. Jesus Christ. What's going on? Are we doing our plugs?
I think so. I think we're all set. So you can start saying
Listen.
words to them.
This was through our Patreon. Patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. GAMEFULLY unemployed. For $5 a month, you get access to a bunch of podcasts like Tom and Jeff Watch Batman, Fox Mulder is a Maniac, Star Trek The Next Futurama, and Spiel Boys. There's also tiers where you can watch movies with us every Friday night or have your own custom podcast like this one.
This one.
So go on there, check it out. Please support us. It keeps us alive. It keeps us going.
Mm-hmm.
It keeps us fed. We buy water. Water's not cheap. Right?
Especially not
for people
yeah.
listening in Europe. Yeah, we have to buy water in America. It's really expensive. And then they make us like wait in line, water lines, and then they give us wedgies and they sack tap us every time.
It's brutal.
Spread the word.
Yeah. I couldn't tell if you were joking there because a lot of places legitimately don't have clean water right now.
That's true. That's what's beauty about it. Is it a lie?
Not really. Not
It's
really
a
lying.
little. It's a little in between.
Not really
It's
exaggerating.
again. It reminds me of my my cousin's wife. Who was I could call my cousin as well. Who was from Spain, and I think it was one of her friends or her who like first asked my cousin, "Is it true you sell guns in the supermarket in America?" And he was like, "No, I mean Walmart."
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I guess that is
Yeah,
true.
there are groceries in
we
Walmart.
We do sell guns in the supermarket.
We
here.
sure do.
That is that's fucked up.
You know what else we sell, Dave? We sell merchandise in our store, which you can visit by
Yeah.
going to gamefullyunemployed.com, where you can find a link to our Teespring store, where we have all kinds of cool original artwork and designs you can get on t-shirts, mugs, stickers, posters, all sorts of things. So slap your little super peepers on that.
Slam it down on that.
Your
Are
superhero
peepers balls?
No, they're
The eyes.
your eyes.
They're your eyes.
Your eyes.
Everything's genitals with me.
It's probably because you just got done reading this comic.
That's a good point. Yeah,
Yes. It's a very genitalia forward comic.
it is. It loves its genitals.
Yep. Anyway,
Don't we all?
listen, Dave, within you are two teenage boys.
One loves genitals. The other loves genitals.
Yeah. The other loves F-14s
Yeah.
with genitals.
And genitals.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.